The most senior Tamil politician in Sri Lanka is apoplectic with rage. C.V. Vigneswaran, Chief Minister of the Northern Province, is accusing a senior UN official in the office of the Secretary-General of attempting to strong-arm him into agreeing to a plan which he claims betrays the victims of war crimes and undermines calls for an international court. The civil war lasted nearly 3 decades and ended in a bloodbath. 6 years ago, Tamil insurgents were finally pinned down on a thin shard of land under ferocious bombardment. The UN says tens of thousands of Tamil civilians trapped with them were killed, mostly by government shelling, although the Tamil Tiger separatists are also accused of war crimes. As time went by, evidence of atrocities mounted, and last year the UN Human Rights Council ordered a formal war crimes inquiry.
Sri Lanka categorically and unreservedly rejects this draft resolution, as it challenges the sovereignty and independence of a member state of the UN.
But when an election swept out the old regime in January this year, the UN agreed to delay its war crimes report to September. Among Tamils, the delay provoked fury. Now there's renewed anger because of an internal UN document which appears to preempt the war crimes report. Channel 4 News has obtained a copy. The UN document sets out a proposal for building peace through reconciliation and accountability. So far, so good. Its two key implementing partners, the government of Sri Lanka and the Tamil-dominated Northern Provincial Council. Its first aim, the establishment of mechanisms to address human rights violations and accountability. The document doesn't actually use the term war crimes. And who will oversee the establishment of this judicial mechanism? The Sri Lankan Prime Minister's Office and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, with the UN confined to providing technical assistance. No mention of the Northern Provincial Council at all. We asked the Council what they made of this. The Chief Minister rejected the entire proposal, branding this a dubious and dangerous document, unilaterally conceived by the UN and the government of Sri Lanka. He said it preempted the outcomes and recommendations of the UN war crimes investigators. It would be a betrayal, he said, of the hopes pinned on the UN process by war victims. The alleged war crimes were investigated in the documentary No Far Zone, credited with helping convince the UN to launch its war crimes inquiry. The film's director obtained the new UN document.
The reason the Tamil victims feel so betrayed by this is that they desperately hope that the UN itself will set up some form of international court to try these crimes. They believe that a domestic process would amount to nothing more than a victor's court, and would certainly not have that essential quality, which is the support and the confidence of the victims.
The previous Sri Lankan regime was widely condemned for the abduction, torture and assassination of its opponents. A report released today by the human rights group the International Truth and Justice Project says the systematic persecution of Tamils through torture, rape, illegal detention and killing continues under the new government. This new government has pledged to end the repression of the previous regime. It has not responded to our requests for a statement.
Our lawyers have documented 8 cases of white van abduction and torture and sexual violence by the security forces this year in Sri Lanka. And these are cases that haven't reached the UK or other countries, so they may well be the tip of an iceberg we don't know the size of. So in that kind of atmosphere where the violations are very much ongoing, it's very hard to see how victims could possibly trust any kind of domestic accountability process in Sri Lanka at the moment.
This a sentiment magnified many times over for Tamils, who survived the horror of the final few months of the conflict.
I can't see any justice being, happening in a domestic inquiry. I mean, the people, how can the people who actually made the crime do the investigation as well? And there won't be any justice in that.
In a statement to Channel 4 News tonight, the UN said it supports accountability mechanisms that meet international standards. Whether that should be a domestic or international process or comprise elements of both will need to be determined, it said. The UN, it went on, will await the High Commissioner's report and recommendations to make a determination. The UN also believes, it said, that there should be genuine and inclusive consultations on a national basis, including the Northern Province.